Hi, welcome to Design Philosophies and Lessons from Developing Merged Dragons. I'm Ray Mazza. I'm from Graham Games. Quick disclaimer, the views in this presentation are entirely my own and do not represent those of my wonderful employer. I've been designer through creative director on all of these games, tons of Sims games. I'm also the creator of Merged Dragons. I started Merged Dragons as an indie project years ago, then I joined Graham Games. With an absolutely incredible team, we've since grown it to be one of today's top mobile games. So I'm super excited to be here today to share with you what I think makes Merged Dragons unique and successful. We're going to talk about some of the design philosophies that shaped Merged Dragons, two of the design tools that made it possible, and then I'll share some interesting lessons on how we make money. But before all of this, we begin with a story that starts almost a decade ago. Once upon a time, there was a design problem, a large one that spanned a genre of games. The story begins with that problem. I worked on a game called The Sim Social about 8 years ago. In this screenshot, it probably looks fine to you. This player is really into the game, they've decorated their home very nicely, but the problem that I'm talking about is right here, and it's a problem that haunted me. Here's another game I worked on, SimCity Social. It's a great game, but again, there's a problem in this screenshot that haunted me, though you're not going to see it. And here's Farmville 2. Same haunting problem. And the reason you don't see the problem is because things look generally great in these screenshots, right? Well, compare that one to this one, which is closer to the start of the game. There's no problem here. I can look at this and I can relax. So here it is. In all of these cases, the player has nearly exhausted their real estate. And this causes issues, especially in games like these, which are primarily about collection, where much of your motivation is to hoard as many cool objects, buildings, and animals as possible. This is what I started calling the full garden problem. When a player's so-called garden is full, they don't want to destroy it to make room for new things. Just like when an artist fills up their canvas, they wouldn't want to paint over their new masterpiece, right? So what do? The players disengage. It's the end of their game. And this is a big problem because it's the best players and spenders that reach this stage. Now you could give them additional canvases, but that comes with its own challenges and churn. And I was hoping for a more elegant solution. So those game projects, they came and they went, but they left this full garden problem constantly stirring in the back of my mind. And meanwhile, I've been playing a lot of this other fantastic game, and maybe you can guess which one. Triple Town by Spry Fox. This is such a great game. I was glued to this. This is a puzzle game where you get a piece to place on the board each turn, and once you place it, you can't move it. But if you line up 3 of the same thing, they merge into a single better-looking piece worth more points, thus clearing up additional space. So I'm thinking about this mechanic, and I'm suddenly struck by a case of game design math. Like, what if we took Triple Town-style merging and used that as a mechanic in a collection-style game that has this full garden problem? Well, that could solve the space issue because you'd be constantly freeing up more space for yourself every time you make a merge, and you'd be progressing your decorative items all at the same time. And thus, the seed for Merged Dragons was born. Okay, now let's talk a little bit more about game design math. Game design math is the explicit process of combining concepts from multiple games to form new ideas, and then often mixing in a heavy dash of outside inspiration. All ideas ever are combinations of prior knowledge. It's like idea evolution. You're mixing DNA of multiple ideas and sometimes introducing mutations and then birthing a new concept. And the reason I want to talk about this is because giving it this name, game design math, it makes it tangible and turns it into a useful tool that you can use to create new game ideas and brainstorm interesting features. Now, it's already something you do when you design. We all do it, we just aren't usually conscious of it. But thinking about it explicitly like this makes it powerful, and just knowing this phrase will actually help you think about how you think about ideas. So let's try it. It's super simple and fun. Now, these don't have to sound perfect, they just need to give you a bit of pause so you can sit back and say, oh, okay, that could be really neat. What if? For example, take Shadow of the Colossus and combine that with the little Pikmin hordes from Pikmin. Lots and lots and lots of Pikmin. What do you get? Something interesting? I'd want to play that game. Or what if you took Skyrim and added portal guns? Yes. The more different the games are from each other, the more potentially wild and novel the result. Somewhat like Merged Dragons. Or disastrous. So last one, how about Fortnite combined with Katamari Damacy? It's as simple as that, and it can lead to wonderful ideas. This is next year's top grossing app, by the way. Mark my words. So that's where merge dragons came from. Spontaneous game design math used to solve a problem in game design. In case some of you are unfamiliar with merge dragons, there are two main modes of play. The first is your dragon camp, where you collect all your dragons and items and then play with them. Then there's the saga-style map, where you enter the other main mode of play, levels. Now, these are puzzle-like areas where you're tasked with healing the land so you can get access to these Gaia statues, which you merge in order to win. And the core mechanic throughout the game is, of course, merging. Merge three of the same thing to get something better, more useful, and more beautiful. So here's a brief video so we can look at the game in action. Here's the world map. We're going to jump into a level. And in the level, you can merge eggs to hatch helpful dragons. You can also merge the items, which the dragons will harvest from in order to get items for you that you can use to heal the land or solve puzzles. If you're clever about how you merge the items, then you can get combos that give these healing bubbles. And you can also merge objects directly off the dead land to heal it instantly, so there is some strategy here. And then the ultimate goal is to free up those Gaia statues so you can merge them to trigger the level win. And then when you win the level, you'll get some level rewards that pop up, and you can make some choices about what you want to bring back to your camp. Pick a couple things here. Now, jumping back into camp, the other main mode of play is this. This is camp. This is like your interactive trophy case. This is where you get to bring back all those cool items that you've won in levels and the great items and dragons that maybe you've gotten in events that you participated in. And then you get to merge them and tap them to discover new items and make even better items and better dragons. And the whole time your dragons are they're flying around harvesting things for you to use and merge. And then as you level up your dragons, you're able to clear away more of this evil fog to unlock more of your camp. That's the crash course in merge dragons. Excellent. Okay, on to the design philosophies. Design philosophy number 1, be unique. It's totally possible to make successful clones or minor iterations on what's out there, especially in free-to-play, and that's why people do it. But few people can find true, deep satisfaction from that. So much of the joy of design is in that meandering journey of discovering which unique combinations of elements seemingly magically create this compelling gameplay. And then getting to be the responsible parent who gets to nurture the design and help it grow and take on a life of its own. Another point of view from Elizabeth Gilbert is that your creative work is not your baby. She says, if anything, you are its baby. In other words, what you make defines you and helps you grow. You are a product of your works. So if you're making a game, wouldn't you rather be the product of something original? Or you can make a game where the icon is a yelling man. It's up to you. Here's something that helps. You should be able to pitch what is unique about your game in a single sentence. Pick the most salient aspect that separates your game from everything else, and if you could do this, you're in very good shape. For Merge Dragons, the manifesto was this: bring merging directly into a simulating game world to create the deepest merge game in existence. Philosophy number 2, infinite play. If you're making a free-to-play game, you don't want it to have an end, right? The longer you sustain your player base, the more likely you are to be able to make money and support your game, and the longer your players will get enjoyment from it. Now, you can do this with procedural content, user-generated content, or PvP, but Merge Dragons doesn't have much of that. So, to work toward infinite play in Merge Dragons, we hold that some content should be nearly impossible to reach, but in a good way. Like, there should always be something else tantalizing to look forward to that feels within grasp. And we do this by sizing our merge chains appropriately long. And this is how we refer to our sequences of mergeable objects, merge chains. By sizing our merge chains to 12 objects or more, we have found that the exponential investment needed to work through them ensures that we have lots of content that's significantly difficult to reach at that top end. And every object that you add to the end of a chain triples the time investment required. Let's say someone wanted to merge up this Terra dragon. Well, first, why would you even want to do that? Higher-level dragons are faster at harvesting, building, and they have more stamina. More importantly, high-level dragons give you more dragon power. This is one of the main metrics in the game, and that unlocks more land in camp. Okay, so to level up this Terra Dragon, here's an example of how merging compounds the time investment. This is going to show you how many eggs you need to merge to eventually end up at each level of dragon. So 3 eggs for level 1 dragon, up to 81 eggs for the level 4 dragon. Might seem manageable so far, right? But if you want to merge those level 4 dragons, multiply that by 3, and you'll have found the next tier of dragon nest, which hatches the level 5 dragon. Getting this far can already take a month or more. But then you keep going deeper into the progression and going, and then to get this top level dragon takes an investment of about 6,500 eggs. Or maybe you're efficient by merging 5s instead of 3s, which gives 2 dragons instead of 1, and then you can do this all in only about 1,500 eggs. Solid strategy. Only a small fraction of players ever make these top level of dragons, and nobody's gotten them all, so there's always more room for them to work toward. Now let's say someone wanted to level up their life flowers in order to harvest better life orbs for healing land. What does that look like? Well, here's the progression, and this is the longest merge chain we have in the game. It takes 729 of the level 1 to reach the top level life flower here, but this chain keeps going into the life trees, and we start to get into the thousands, and then the millions, and then you might think, well, that's just ridiculous, that's way too many. But what we do is higher level objects will shortcut you into this chain by dropping higher level life flowers. So you can actually earn your way to a faster progression, and then you're skipping various levels. And many of the other objects in the game work in a similar way, which makes the various object progressions interesting and valuable. And with these shortcuts, a few of the most dedicated players have actually been able to reach the top, but it still takes an incredibly long time. Another way we get infinite play is by adding economic replay value to our levels. Merge Dragons has about 250 levels, which is far, far fewer than the 1,000 or more that most of the popular Match 3 games have. So we need to do something else. And what we do is every level has its own progression system, seen in this progress bar here that says 1 out of 3 wins. If you win this level 2 more times, you get that special chest. And then the bar resets, the requirement goes up a bit, and then the reward upgrades to an egg of an exclusive Cosmos Dragon. You do it again, and the reward changes to a Cosmos Dragon nest. And it loops like this infinitely. So the player will often play levels many times so they can earn and level up these Cosmos Dragons. And it's actually a huge motivator that these rewards are unique, the exclusive Cosmos Dragons. I can't recall seeing this sort of progression in any other Saga-style games, but it works quite well to give our levels replay value. Philosophy number 3, merge everything. Everything and anything. By default, when we design items in Merge Dragons, we think of them all as mergeable, and we only have them not be mergeable if there's a strong case against it. What this does is it teases the curiosity and opens up a world of wonder to both the player and also to the designer as we're designing these things. Way back, some of the first questions we asked under this philosophy were, what would happen if you could merge the treasure chests, or the currencies, or the creatures? Well, in the spirit of this philosophy, as you might know, you can merge all of those things, including pretty much all the resources in the game, like these coins, which has some fun side effects like exponential inflation. Or these life orbs, which you can burst for essence to heal dead land. Now, one of the best results of being able to merge resources is the player has frequent interesting choices. Do you use the resource now for a smaller gain, or do you put off your immediate satisfaction and invest in your future for far greater payoff? This is a strong mechanic because players can set their own goals to work towards, which makes them motivated during the journey, and then when they reach the end, it's super satisfying when they finally get to pop that giant life orb or heal incredible amounts of land, or maybe you collect that precious currency and go on some kind of unbridled spending spree. We strive to give players interesting choices, not just with resources, but with all the content. Like, do I want 3 lower level items that my dragons can harvest in parallel? Or maybe should I merge them for 1 higher level item that gives better loot? Do I want an orchard of fruit trees to make money, or a Zen rock garden to harvest stones for building things? Or maybe both, or something else entirely? Do I save space for larger objects like wonders, or have lots of smaller things? And these trade-offs and the freedom to play with and merge whatever content you want creates a sandbox for self-directed play, and it's incredibly powerful and intrinsically rewarding. In the spirit of this merge everything and anything philosophy, here's some of the other crazy questions we asked ourselves. What if you could merge the completed levels? Or the land masses on the world map? Even the UI elements? Like, merging UI elements, it sounds crazy, but it's asking yourself or your team these seemingly outlandish questions like this that could lead to new ideas. In our case, this question of merging UI elements led directly to the thought, well, could we merge those quest stars that are in the HUD there? There are 3 right there. Well, no, merging those UI elements is a bit too crazy, but what if we had a physical quest star that dropped onto the terrain? Well, then we could merge those. And so now that's actually what happens. In the game, when you complete a quest, a star fills in the UI, and then an actual star object falls to the ground. And then you can tap that to shake out your quest rewards rather than having to dig down into some UI to get them. But if you get 3, then you can merge those for a giant quest star, which has much better loot. It's also perfect that each level has exactly 3 quests, so to merge the stars, you need to complete all the quests. This is an example of novel gameplay that derived directly from considering our philosophies at nearly every seemingly odd step of the way. So I'll say hold on tight to your philosophies. And also, when you're brainstorming, if you never reach the absurd, then you haven't actually brainstormed long enough. You haven't gone deep enough. Why? Because quantity is the key to creativity. It takes quantity to move beyond the obvious ideas to the unusual, the absurd, and to find new perspectives. In his book Thinker Toys, Michael Michalko tells how Leonardo da Vinci believed that the first ways that he looked at problems were always too biased toward his normal ways of thinking. And what da Vinci learned to do is he learned to shift his perspective on problems over and over and over again to think about them from all these different angles. And with each shift, he would feel his grasp of the problem space deepening until he felt like he grokked the very essence of the problem. He understood it totally. And that's what brainstorming is. It's generating ideas to view a particular creative problem from all these different perspectives until you've explored the space so deeply that you grok it. And then you can divine the best solutions and also the best designs. Okay, moving on to the next philosophy. When I was 5 years old, my nanny used to take me on walks around the block. And I don't remember very much from when I was 5, but I do remember these walks. In particular, there was this one house way down on the corner of the street that I was always super excited to walk by because every time, without fail, I could search in the grass on the edge of the front lawn and I'd be able to find a marble. Or on good days, maybe 2 or 3 marbles, which in retrospect, I'm fairly certain my nanny had been planting ahead of time. She was wonderful. But collecting these marbles was exciting. Even more exciting was the thrill of discovering them. Knowing that if I looked hard enough, I'd be able to find one and I'd get to enjoy its unique patterns and colors. And I would often hold it up to the sky to see what tiny details I could make out and look at the air bubbles. This particular experience that I had, it was unique. But this enjoyment of discovery, that's a fundamental quality we all share, which leads us to the most important philosophy of the Merge Dragons design. Discovery above all else. Everyone loves to discover things. And if you caught that Subnautica talk the other day, then you saw that discovery was their core pillar as well, together with exploration. And in Merge Dragons, we want to tend to and cultivate this curiosity to discover. In the design, the framework for this began with the content graph. Tripletown is a content graph that looks like this. This is designed for puzzle games, so it's nice and tight. For Merge Dragons, we target explorer gamer types first and foremost. Explorers want a grand adventure full of discovery. Making a broad and deep content graph with lots to discover was a place to do that. So let's take a look. Here's a zoomed in section of just one merge chain, the fruit trees. And then here's the main chain from Tripletown for comparison, which is the same length. This way you can start to get a sense of scale. And as we layer in interactions like what our dragons can harvest or what can be tapped out of the objects, we deepen the level of discovery. Our fruit trees produce these fruits. And then you can harvest or merge those fruits for some rewards. And the player might also discover that the trees grow life flowers around them over time. A quick aside about time and discovery. What the objects and the dragons do over time, all on their own, creates many moments of discovery, and it's vital to the richness of this design philosophy, because it means the player can do literally nothing. They can just sit there and watch, and the game will present these surprising opportunities to engage with, such as, for example, maybe a puddle evaporates and turns into a mushroom, or seeds blow by for you to collect. Perhaps some normal grass dies and turns into necromancer grass. Or a dragon finds a chest and then drops it on the terrain for you to open, and so on. I've always been fascinated by John Conway's Game of Life, where you can set up simple arrangements of pieces, and then the board will take on a life of its own. We wanted to capture at least a little bit of this feeling of a living game board by having objects that create others or die away totally agnostic of the player. And we try to get this by very consciously including time in our content graph. Okay, now back to the overall structure of this. There are a few ways to start building into this chain of fruit trees. You can either catch floating leaves to merge, or you can find seeds, which you can merge, or again, with the element of time, you can wait and let the seeds grow into sprouts all on their own, which creates another interesting choice because it's more efficient to do that. Then at the very end of the chain is the wonder, the magic beanstalk, and this spawns some rare tribal dragon eggs and high-level life flowers. And this is just the fruit trees. There's a ton to discover here already, but we zoom out and we start to see the complexity and the breadth of the object graph with some of these other merge chains. And this is actually just a far simplified subset of the content graph. The full graph is like 10 times larger than this, so you could actually imagine something bigger than this. And if you look at even just this piece, it does give you a sense of curiosity and wonder. It calls to you that there's a ton to discover in the sandbox of merge dragons simply by combining objects, tapping them, and harvesting them, or waiting to see what they do all on their own as time passes. Now this web of content to discover and how it's all interconnected, this is where a lot of the meat of the merge dragons design sits. We make sure there are just the right number of branches and connections such that playing feels like you're wandering through a friendly maze in an enchanted forest. Find always another path to explore, but not so many intersections that you get hopelessly lost. Here's an example of a discovery experience that a player can have as a result of this rich, interconnected graph. So the player might unlock this area of camp where there are a lot of these dead trees, and the player notices this necromancer grass growing around the trees. So they harvest it, and they find some of these strange seeds. When they come back later, they notice the seeds have grown, and they've discovered a new chain, the prism flowers. So the player decides to have the dragons harvest the trees to see if that's how to get more of this necromancer grass, but instead they get these decayed logs. And then the dragons start shooting fire at the dead logs, which burst into nice logs. So the player merges those for larger wood piles, and eventually the player gets a bush gnome cabin. The player taps this for shrubs and then discovers the bushes chain. And while the player is merging these bushes, they realize they can tap or harvest the bushes from mushrooms. And on it goes like this, with each item connected to one or more other pieces of content that leads to this seemingly endless journey of wonder and discovery. Now, something that would totally destroy any of this feeling of discovery is if we showed the player all of that content graph up front. Right? A lot of games will show you their full catalog of objects to entice you to keep playing. We believe in the exact opposite. We hide the entire catalog, and we only show you what you've discovered. Our discovery UI looks like this. This player has found the first two fountains, and the rest are hidden. And we only start to tease you with the descriptions for the next two. Because if you want players to be curious and explore your game, you can't tell them the whole story, right? Only give them part of the catalog. Only show them part of the map. Let some things go unexplained, or let everything go unexplained. Leave the rest for the player to discover. Famed writer-director J.J. Abrams says, "Maybe there are times when mystery is more important than knowledge." This is what the allure of Lost, Westworld, and many of his other shows and films was, and always giving the viewer an answer, but creating 2 or 3 more tantalizing questions in the process. He has this great story about this box right here, his mystery box, that he purchased at a magic shop decades ago when he was just a kid, and he's never opened it. Why not? He says because it represents possibility. It represents hope. It represents potential. Your imagination will often fill in the gaps with fantastical thoughts and wonder, making an experience much richer and more enjoyable than if you'd experienced the full reality immediately, or in some cases ever. Abrams uses an example of watching Alien or Jaws, knowing there's some incredible terror out there, but that not being able to see it for most of the movie is a much more powerful experience because it excites your imagination beyond any possible reality. In a way, every object in Merge Dragons is its own mystery box. One of the most common reasons players say they play is because they wanted to see what will come next when merging, which is exactly what we're going for. Who doesn't love to discover things? And look at all of us. We're all here at the GDC to discover new knowledge and to find new inspiration. Discovery is about learning, after all. The moment that you stop being curious about life is the moment your soul has given up. Because life itself is a quest for discovery. It's universal. And that's why discovery is such a strong, incredibly strong foundation of play. But not enough games take this to heart. So I'm going to say, games need more discovery. And my favorite, secrets. Here's a piece of the world map in Merge Dragons. How many level nodes do you see? You only see 4. But there are actually 5. If your attention is drawn to that triangle formation of stones in the water up there, then you're onto something. If you tap that top stone, you'll find a secret level. Our world map has secrets like this scattered all over. Players find these by accident at first, and it's such an amazing feeling. And then they talk about it. Secrets foster conversations in the community all the time, and they give players this insider knowledge to share, which feels great to them. Secrets also make games feel larger than they are, because by their very nature, you won't ever feel like you've found them all, right? If you feel like you're in a world full of discovery and secrets, that world is a world that feels huge. That's the world we're going for. Philosophy number 5, super polished feedback. Now, I found the word polish usually means let's make this thing in our game not suck, but super polish, it's about going beyond the nice to the fantastic. The mere act of interacting with your game on a moment-to-moment basis should be a reward in and of itself, regardless of any of the economic benefits. It should be pleasurable from the interaction feedback alone. You want your interactions to look incredible, sound incredible, and then for the interactions in which you want your player to feel the most rewarded, you actually want to congratulate them verbally or through text. And the more orthogonal vectors of this feedback you use within each category, the more satisfying an interaction can be, as long as you don't go overboard for whatever the style of game you're making is. Okay, so what does this mean, orthogonal vectors of feedback? Well, here's an example. When you tap a nest in Merge Dragons to shake an egg out, just the visual feedback has these 4 independent parts to it. And let's take a look. So the nest shakes as if your tap jostles it. That's nice and tactile. Then there are these flashes, these split-second flashes, and there are these radiating sparkle effects as well. And then the resulting egg swoops very nicely away from the nest. That's 4 different pieces of visual feedback that stack nicely on top of each other for a very satisfying effect. Okay, now let's take a look at another video from Merge Dragons. What I've done here is I've gone in and I've removed a lot of this great feedback. So we're going to look at this, and then we'll compare it to what it should be. Now, there is still some feedback in here, but it's minimal. Here it goes. Okay, so there were some sounds, there were some reactions, some effects, and a lot of games might consider this acceptable, but it's so minimal, so MVP, and to me it just feels dead. All right, so now let's take a look at the same exact setup, but where the game's normal feedback has been restored. This is going to have shakes, flashes, scale punches, more text and effects, and better audio, among other things. It is a good day, isn't it? So there you saw the exact same gameplay, but it was much easier to follow with all that feedback. And with the super polished interactions, it just feels so much more enjoyable, especially when you're the one touching it, doing those things. And when you get to a point with a feature where a lot of people consider it good enough to go out the door, great. Don't release it yet. Now you get to do the fun stuff, right? Just spend 20% more time adding interaction, polish, and feedback, and that's where 80% of the player's satisfaction will come from when they're engaging with it. It's the difference between those 2 clips you just saw, and it's huge. Now, you'll probably have to spend this at the expense of adding more features or new content, but that's okay. Few great features are more powerful than many just good features. It's totally worth it. By the way, super polish isn't just about feedback. It's also about the quality of the assets you use and the choices you make about them. For example, we have this watermelon tree in the game. We could have been more realistic and only had things growing on trees from real life, but 1, that's not fun, and 2, that limits the art to less appealing options. This watermelon looks juicy. It looks very collectible. You want to shake it off the tree and keep it or collect it. Every piece of art in your game should be so attractive that you'd want to frame it and hang it on your wall. Okay, the final philosophy before we move on, number 6. The game should be relaxing and cozy. I went to a GDC talk almost a decade ago now and saw a lecture about this game, Farmville. And one thing really stuck with me. The speaker shared this nice anecdote about some research they did where they asked players why they play. And one of the answers from an older lady was this: I play to relax. And I just thought this was incredibly encouraging that someone would play therapeutically, like not just to have some sort of abstract notion of fun, but rather play in the same calming, meditative way that a person might engage with Sudoku, or sit in the bath, or read before bed. This is just so wonderful, and we want to take this to heart with Merge Dragons. A relaxing game is welcoming and approachable. It gives you a place to unwind from your day. It doesn't judge you or punish you or threaten you, and it does not make you feel rushed. Dan Cook, by the way, has a fantastic article specifically about cozy games, and you should check it out. Now, here's some of the ways we achieve this in Merge Dragons. First, and most importantly, you can freely move items around without any limit. It's not about the challenge and the puzzle, although the game has some of those elements. But first and foremost, it's about being an engaging and relaxing activity. And I emphasize the word activity. We've designed Merge Dragons to be more of an activity than a game. And as such, we want players to be able to go at their own pace without fear of messing up. Next, sure, there are enemies, but they're somewhat rare and they don't even show up until you're ways into the game. And even then, the enemies are pretty easy to defeat, making them more of an exciting experience than a stressful encounter. And here's one that I got wrong originally. Merge Dragons used to have a timer at the end of every level, which I thought would just be a fun way to add replay value by giving players this way to try and beat their previous times, right? Instead, what happened was playtesters would play and then they'd say things like this: oh, I didn't know I was supposed to be going so fast, and oh, I guess I was playing it wrong? What these players have been doing was taking their time in levels, and then in many cases they would get to a point where they could win. But then they would choose to just keep on harvesting and merging things on the board for fun, trying to discover new things, right? The power of discovery. That's what was motivating them. And then sometimes they would do this for an hour or more, even on levels designed to just take a few minutes. And then they would only trigger that win when they felt like they'd explored enough of the content. They had been setting their own goal. And that was great. Hitting them over the head with a timer and destroying the way they'd been engaging with the game, that was terrible. That was the total opposite of relaxing. Your players should never feel like they're playing the game wrong. If they do, something about the design is broken, as it was for us right here. So we removed the timer, and it was a fantastic decision. Okay, quick summary of the design philosophies. Be unique. Make sure you can pitch what's different about your game in a single sentence. Infinite play, which is vital to the health of a free-to-play game. Merge everything. Hold on to your design philosophies at nearly every odd step of the way, and make sure you find the absurd in your brainstorms. Discovery above all, the most important. Discovery is part of our human nature, and it's an incredibly powerful motivator. Imbue your worlds with discovery and secrets, and they will feel immense and captivating. Super polish. Go beyond the nice. Spend that extra 20% of time polishing to reach the fantastic. Relaxing and cozy. We wanted Merge Dragons to be an activity that players could turn to for escape and relaxation, because that's just nice. Okay, here's the cheat sheet. We have a few more philosophies that we use regularly, but these are the ones that I really wanted to share today. Okay, fun fact. Time for a fun fact. Why is the game about dragons instead of other creatures? I actually didn't even want dragons at first because I thought there were too many dragon games already, right? There are a lot of dragon games. Well, here's why. Dragons, they're an optimization. That's right. Dragons don't have to path plan. They could just fly straight where they're going. And they're easy to animate because they don't need to walk or have these complicated movements. So we have tons of cute dragons, and they work perfectly. Dragons are our life now, and they're awesome. Of course, dragons are awesome, so we do like dragons for that reason. Now I want to share two of the tools we use, because it's always interesting and informative to find out what other designers are using to improve their workflow. To give some context, we can quickly look at the scope of the game. We have over 1,000 objects, 250 plus levels, 40 plus dragon breeds, 1,200 plus quests. That's a lot of content to create and manage. How do we do it? For the levels and for camp, we use a tool called Tiled 2D. It's a free, open source 2D tile map editor, and you can find it on the web. It's easy to use and has lots of great features. It lets you focus on the creation of tile-based levels without any of the overhead that you might have trying to build them in a larger engine. Now, this is one of our smaller levels in the editor, and then here's that same level loaded up in the game. Using this tool, the layout time becomes negligible, and then the designer ends up spending most of their time iterating on the actual concept and the puzzles, which is exactly what a tool should do. Now, I'll quickly show you this level in a pre-recorded video just so you can have a better visual.
Here we have that level loaded up into the tile tool. You can see the whole level right here, but let's zoom in so you get a better view at this resolution. And then in the upper right is where we have our layers. We have a layer for the ground. We have a layer for the objects that we have on the tiles. And we also have a markup layer for how dead each tile should be. It's pretty simple. And then on the other side, we have our tile sets. We have a handful of tile sets. And let's say we wanted to add something to the map. We could say select this treasure chest, and then we'd make sure the proper layer is selected, and then we just paint it right on, just like that. Boom, we've got a couple treasure chests. Maybe we want a big one, so we'll drop that right there. And it's really just that easy. Tiles also have custom properties you can add. So I select this tile up here, you can see it as the custom property prefab with the value treasure underscore chest, which basically tells the game when you find this tile, when you're loading the data, create the object with the ID treasure underscore chest. And that's the quick overview.
Great. So there's a lot more functionality, so if that looks at all interesting or useful to you, you should check it out. The other tool I want to share is my absolute favorite, aside from Unity, which we built Merge Dragons in and which I'm in love with. It's kind of a problem. So as a designer, have you ever had to edit JSON? Hard code large data sets? Maybe use a balancing tool made by someone who didn't have to use it themselves? Or plan your data in a spreadsheet and then risk errors when you're transcribing that into whatever format your game needed? Yuck. As a designer, you shouldn't have to do any of these things. So what's the answer? Spreadsheet exports. Super sexy. I know it sounds awesome. So the idea is simple, but incredibly powerful. It's a way for you to work with your data in a spreadsheet where it lives, and then you hit a button to export it to your game. And these have been exceptionally useful to me, to Merge Dragons, and to many other of the designers and games that I've worked with in the past. I want to say that maybe 50% of the Merge Dragons design is embedded in our spreadsheets. So let's nerd out about spreadsheets for a sec. Spreadsheets, they've been around since long before they existed on computers. Accountants used to enter their data by hand on these giant sprawling sheets of paper, literally spreadsheets, and could spend days calculating results of changing even just a few variables. Hundreds of thousands of accountants did this laborious task because it was the best way to make sense out of large sets of data. And you know what? It still is today, but it's far easier to work with on computers. With spreadsheets, seeing all your data can be beautiful and informative, and editing it can be pleasant. The missing step is then getting your data from there quickly and seamlessly into your game, and that's what I'm evangelizing right now, in addition to spreadsheets, beautiful spreadsheets. Spreadsheets are fantastic for housing sets of like structured data. Merge Dragons has 38 Excel data sheets right now. We have sheets for object definitions, dragon definitions, loot tables, level data, quests, shop items, tutorials, and on and on and on. And any of these export to the game at the press of a button. So how do you set up a system like this? It's fairly easy to implement. First, the designer creates a spreadsheet and then defines the data format. And here's an example. This shows data for the dragon breeds in Merge Dragons. And we usually use a format where each row is a definition of a thing. In this case, each row is a different dragon breed. And then each column is a variable within that definition. So at the intersection, for example, you can see the life dragons are a trophy type dragon. And then step 3, you find some savvy engineers and have them create a simple generalized macro or script that exports the data to whatever format they desire. And this same script should work on every sheet. And this is really where the magic happens. And it must be quick to trigger an export. A single button press, a keyboard shortcut. If you have to dig into a folder to find a script file every time, or if you have to open a console and type a command, that's too much friction and it's a failure. Make it nice and fast. And the good news is, it actually is pretty easy for your engineers to do something like this. Step 4, your engineer makes sure code can read in that exported data, accounting for any new sheet or columns that you've added. And then your game loads or hot loads the data, and voila, your data's in the game. Now, I've got a recorded demo of one of our sheets just so you can get a sense of how much we do in them and what that looks like.
This is our level data sheet. In here, each row is the data for our level in our game. things like energy cost, win criteria, rewards, etc. You can see there's a lot here, but some of our other sheets are much larger. And you can see how relatively attractive this is compared to something like JSON or a generic tool. You can use visualizations like these dials here for energy costs, color scales, data bars, conditional formatting, all sorts of built-in visualizations that would be time-consuming to replicate in some other tool. This kind of formatting makes your data clean and readable and somewhat beautiful. You should be happy while you're editing your data. And you get the benefit of other built-in functionality like filters or data validation, graphs, formulas, commenting, and so on. And we can also have purely informational data. You can see we've marked these columns here with a hash symbol, which is our way of telling the exporter to ignore them. In this case, we've taken data from our analytics team on win rates and level times and pasted it right here because this is the most valuable place that we can see that data, and it helps us to make better decisions. Now I can make a change, and then when I want to export, I just run the macro. That quick, done. We've changed the level data for merge dragons.
Great. So with this spreadsheet export system, the game data entry and maintenance, it's quick and it's easy, and it lets your data stay beautiful. So if you don't have an exporter tool like this, give it some serious consideration because it's just wonderful. Okay, random story time. About this guy, the Midas duck. This is a rare breed in the game. It's very hard to get because you need some golden Midas trees, which are themselves hard to come by. And you need to farm golden apples from those trees and then merge those up a few times and then a few times more and then a few more times until you have 3 giant golden apples, which you need to merge to get this chest, which you need gems to unlock to get this nest of golden eggs, which you merge for the Midas duck. He occasionally drops puddles or coins around your land for you, which is nice. He's pretty neat, and he doesn't afraid of anything. In the design concept phase, given that this was a creature that you would get from golden trees that drop golden apples, I thought it should be a golden dragon, right? The concept of a duck was nowhere in sight. But a lot of the game's initial art came from an outsource house. When I sent off the specs, I liked to give the artists creative freedom when they were designing the dragons. So I often didn't provide any visual reference or descriptions. All I gave them to go on was a name like Grass Dragon or Crimson Dragon, and in this case, Midas Drake. Well, you see what's happening, yeah. The creative freedom worked much better than expected here. Right, so to me, Drake means dragon, but now I know that Drake also means, male duck. And so that's exactly what we got back, a gold-hued male duck. And it was fantastic, but my initial reaction was different, though. I was thinking, no, what happened? It was supposed to be a dragon. There's a game about dragons. How could you do this? But I gave it time to sink in rather than going back to outsourcing immediately, and it's a great thing because I was able to realize how much better this was. It was the first non-dragon being in the game that you could collect, and it turns out the non-dragons became some of the most sought-after characters, precisely because they are so different. And sometimes mistakes can produce better results if you're willing to give them a chance. So there's a duck in the game, and this has actually reframed how we think about making new dragons. Okay, shifting gears, let's look at some of the insights that we've had on monetizing merge dragons. We've learned some interesting things along the way, and one of which has completely shaken me as a designer, but we're going to get to that. Okay, I want to start by recommending that when you develop a free-to-play game, you design a fun core first and foremost, entirely without adding any monetization. This is what we did with merge dragons. Now, I know this point is polarizing. Often you're going to hear that in free-to-play, monetization and design must be considered together. They're inseparable always from the very start. But I believe if you want to be truly creative and make a fresh game that's incredibly fun, you'll have a far better chance at succeeding if your ideas are not clogged with concerns about how to turn players into payers. Otherwise, what will happen is you'll end up being too focused on what has already worked in existing games, and your designs will tend to imitate those and become a bit derivative. Now let me show you one of the interesting places our game makes money. This is a feature we call object dupes. Courtesy of Pepe, thank you. As players merge high-level items, there is a chance to produce what we call a dupe jar. Now, this merge gives the normal result, but then it also gives this duplicate trapped in a dimensional jar, which is going to disappear in 1 hour. But you can spend gems to break the glass for the item. The glass shatters, and the duplicate is yours. Players spend a ton of gems to get these object dupes. The reason this is successful is because it offers such an incredible value in the most timely moment possible. We make sure these prices are fantastic. So maybe you spent days, weeks, even months merging your way up to one of these high-level objects, and then suddenly you get the opportunity to double the result of your efforts for this incredible price. Like, do I want to spend another few weeks making more of these, or get one right now for cheap? Easy decision. Players love it. And if you want your players to purchase something, make it such a win for them that it feels broken, almost as if they're cheating you, right? These prices should make you feel a little bit uncomfortable. This is how you know you are offering your players something of incredible value that they're not just going to engage with, but they're going to love and then thank you for. Another reason the object dupes work well is they're what we call earned opportunities. An earned opportunity is a purchase that the player had to do some work to get. We have a bunch of these in the game. So some of the others are chances to double your rewards from challenges or events, and locked chests that your dragons can find when you tell them to harvest things. Like, who wants to pass up an opportunity to get something valuable that you've worked a long time to earn? This is actually a really friendly way to present offers to players that they feel invested in, rather than spamming them with pop-ups, for example. Stepping back, if we look at where players spend in our game, we can see a clear trend. Permanents are almost always more attractive than consumables. And this shows why having a camp-like area is so powerful. Right? It's your trophy case, and it gives meaning to the sort of permanence that players want. Okay, let's look more closely at energy systems now, or how Merge Dragons drastically raised revenue by changing a single number. This is that thing I mentioned. Camp and levels each have their own energy system. Zooming in, the way energy works in camp is that each dragon has some stamina, which is the number of actions they can perform before they need to head off to sleep. And as a player earns more dragons, their total stamina and thus their total time in camp pretty quickly converges on being unlimited, and they don't need to worry about that anymore. Then there's the level energy system. Players get a maximum of 7 chalices, and that's the most they will ever get. And it costs anywhere from 1 to 7 chalices to play a level. These refresh at 1 per hour. That is a long wait. So the average player can afford to play maybe 4 or 5 levels over the course of a day, and it didn't used to be this way. Originally, they refreshed at 1 per 15 minutes. And originally, most levels cost just 1 chalice to play. But then we tested some variations. Here's what we ended up going with. Chalices moved to that 1-hour refresh rate, so that's 4 times slower than originally. And we increased the cost of playing levels to an average of just over 3 chalices. That's a 3x cost increase. Combined, that's a whopping 12x reduction in the speed of level consumption. 12x, that's insane. And the original balancing, by the way, that was designer's gut. What I thought felt good to players. So what happened? Why did we do this? Well, players had been burning through all the levels too quickly and then quitting. And what do you know? This rebalance fixed it. Yay. That's what we were trying to accomplish, and it worked well. But, and there's a big but here, it's a good one though, but the big unexpected win here was that players began to engage with the camp game much, much more. All that time that they could not spend in levels now, they started to spend in camp. Our revenue looks something like this emoji here. Because of all that extra time players were now spending in camp. Some players hadn't even played camp at all until this change. But camp is where players find their lasting value. Again, it's their trophy case, as well as their main journey of discovery. So it's where players like to spend the most. A stark reality is actually that Merge Dragons probably would not be around today if we had not made this change. And I'm just astounded by this as a designer, that it's possible a single value could be the difference between the life and death of your free-to-play game. Right? For us, it was this rate of level consumption number. All this work to create such an amazing game, years and years of design, playtesting, engineering, art, crafting a wonderful experience for players, and it could have died. Right? There was a chance we'd never have thought to try rebalancing this part of the game. But all it took was to find the right variables to tweak. And it's a change we could have made in literally 15 minutes. As a designer, you don't normally think of things like this as being what makes or breaks your game, right? You instead think, well, maybe I need more engaging systems, or maybe I need to sell items that feel more valuable. I must not have made these parts of the game fun enough. But it's quite possible that your game could burst to life by changing a single value, a value that may have profound effect on how players consume your game. And it's not like our game wasn't fun before this change and then suddenly it was fun after the change. It was the same level of fun before and after. It's just that we changed where they're spending their time and where they're having their fun. And I've been absolutely blown away by that, and it's actually kind of scary as a designer. Now let me share with you an interesting graph we found recently. This is data from Google Play, averaged across many games. And what this shows is the relationship between how long players play your game on their first day versus how likely they are to come back the next day. This is incredible data. The trend here is extremely clear. The longer you can get your players to play your game on their first day, the more likely you are to have a returning player. Now, this is a strong argument against any sort of system that forces players out of your game. As a designer, maybe you hated energy systems, and deep down you intuited this relationship already, right? That if you let your players play longer, they'll get more engaged and have more of a chance to find the fun. Seems natural. But here's the proof, and it's beautiful. So if there are people at your company trying to convince you that you should put in session limiters, especially on a player's first day, now you can point to this. I'm going to sum this all up as, let players play as much as they want. But I'm also going to add, as we learned in Merge Dragons, be mindful of where in your game they're playing and how you balance that division of time, because it can have a huge impact on the success of your game. Now, stepping back a bit, I'd like to sum up some of the important points that we've learned about monetization and retention, especially for casual puzzle game mashups like we are. So if you're making a game like Homescapes, Gardenscapes, Matched and Mansion, this is probably especially relevant to you. 1, camp and other trophy case-like areas have far more potential than levels. Camp should be core, levels should be secondary. We like to say, come for the levels, stay for the camp. 2, players value permanent items far more than any sort of consumables. Again, a need that camp areas are set up to serve. And Merge Dragons isn't the first game that we've noticed this on. I've seen this in the past on some of the other games I worked on. And 3, uncapped session length is healthier for your game than using energy systems to force players out. It's another need that camp areas can serve. I believe in this so much that I'm going to make the prediction that devs are going to start realizing this, and in the next 3 to 5 years or so, the most successful casual puzzle games will be the ones that have evolved to include camp-like areas designed specifically for infinite play. Okay, so now we're at the end, and I'm going to leave you with one final thought. Sometimes I get down thinking about how competitive the industry is today, with dozens of games released on Steam each day and hundreds, maybe 1,000 released on mobile each day. Veritable tidal waves of games to get lost among. But then I realize what I think is my greatest takeaway from this entire experience with Merge Dragons, which is this. If a game as different as Merge Dragons can be this successful, and it is perhaps successful in large part because it is so different, just like that Midas duck, then there's still a ton of blue sky out there with incredible and novel concepts waiting to be discovered, nurtured, and grown into games that soar above those tidal waves for millions upon millions of people to enjoy. And you and I, and all of us here, and all the people watching, the people who love games the most, the people who really care and constantly seek inspiration, we will be the ones who will be able to do that. Thank you. I want to quickly thank Pepe Trapani and the rest of the Merge Dragons team and all of Gram Games for being incredible. If you could please take 10 seconds to fill out the evaluation forms when they arrive in the email, that would be the most excellent. Thank you, because I'd really love your feedback. We do have time for questions.
Yes. Hi. Thank you so much. It was very interesting. So I was wondering about target audience. Have you thought about when you were making the game, who will play your game? You know, like, and maybe when you realize that, I don't know, women play it more or men play it more, like, was it affecting your further design? Thanks.
That last piece, was it affecting our
design? I mean.
Oh, design. Yeah, that's a great question. This is actually one of the other design pillars, design philosophies that I didn't get to include in the slides, but the question was, by the way, did we think at all about target audience? How did that affect design, how we thought about the game, and like male-female balance, that sort of thing? Yeah, so great question. The core audience, we're targeting basically everyone, people of all ages. And one of the ways we did that was by having just very simple mechanics. The game, you play simply by moving objects around and tapping them. And through that, you get merging. You can tap objects to shake other objects out of them. You can drop your dragons on things or double tap to have them harvest. And also just the aspect of waiting, right, to present opportunities to the player. It's very simple interactions that are highly accessible. And also the autonomy plays a big role in this, where if you're a younger person, then maybe you spend a lot more time just kind of like watching the dragons. And we've had some parents say, "Oh, my 2-year-old loves to watch the dragons." And then you get a bit older, and then you can learn to move stuff around and merge them. And so that's really how we approached it. We just wanted to make sure that the main interactions, the verbs of the game, were super accessible. And we don't have like gore and anything like that. It's just the art style is targeted at everyone. In terms of male-female balance, we didn't actually consider that at all. We wanted everyone to be able to enjoy the game, so we tried to have something that's more in between. Yeah, that's a great question.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hi.
Hi.
So are you worried at all about how the internet will affect mystery and discovery as it compiles the data from your game?
That's a good question too. Do we worry at all about how the internet will affect the discovery pillar of the game? And actually, in the Subnautica talk, I think they address this as well. They call it the wiki effect, where players can just go and look at a wiki, or maybe they jump into Discord, and there is a Merge Dragons Discord, by the way, and find answers to all these things. Not too worried about that, only because the people that are seeking it out are looking for a bit more. There's not that much chance to accidentally run across something about Merge Dragons in your day-to-day internet usage. So it's like the people that are looking for it will find it, and that'll actually deepen their experience because that's something they wanted to find most of the times. So I think we're just okay with it. Yeah, that's a good question though.
Hi, it was like super nice talk. Thanks.
Thank you.
Could you share some mistakes or directions that you start digging that didn't work or something like that? Did you come to your mind?
Yeah, well, what are some of the mistakes? Well, I mean, there was definitely that one about trying to have a timer at the end of every level. And, oh geez, what are the other mistakes? We do a handful of A/B testing, so we will find features that just don't work or just don't make a difference. And I wouldn't call any of those mistakes. I would just call them tests. We're just seeing what works. Like, what if we have dragons sleep this way instead? And one of the ones that didn't actually work very much is we tried to space out the time players could spend in camp and really actually session it up quite a bit more. And as you saw toward the end of the presentation, we learned that it's better for players to be able to spend as much time as they want in the game. And we didn't know that at the beginning. That's something we learned going along. And so this test we did where we tried to session it out more, that didn't work at all. So that's an example.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Hello.
Hi.
Just a quick question. How long is your lifetime, and how do you deal with the end of merge line? You mentioned that some players just got those high-level dragons. Do you just, from time to time, add new level to everything you have, and do you have some plan for it?
Yeah, so the question is, what's the lifetime? How do we deal with the lifetime and players reaching the end of the content?
How actually long the lifetime? For example, your game looks like it has to have incredible long lifetime, and there has to be players that will be playing, if the game exists 10 years, they will be playing 10 years.
Yeah, yeah. So that's a good question. I can't say exactly like what the average lifetime is, but there are players that have been playing for years. Some of them just on the original content, like they've never updated their game. But one of the things, well, we do a number of things to keep it fresh. So there are some players who have totally unlocked camp. They've found all the wonders, and they stop playing temporarily. But we throw events every 2 weeks, and they come back for those events. They play the events. They get back into the game for a few more days, and then they take another break. But we do constantly look at adding more dragons and adding new features and more content. And that keeps them coming back, especially the events. The live events really helps. Thank you. Hi.
Hello. Thank you for this great talk. And I know that Merge Dragon is very successful, but at the same time, I occasionally read articles about players complaining that they being so addicted to this game and spend too much time and miss something important in their life. I'm curious, as a curator, what's your thought about like the social responsibility for a mobile game?
Ooh, that's a tough question. And it looks like it's been an hour, so we're.
Okay.
That's the last question.
Thank you.
So the question was, how do we deal with the social responsibility, or what do we think about the social responsibility of players that can get addicted to games like this? And that is a really heavy question. Our jobs as designers are to make the game as fun as possible, to get players to really want to play.
Yeah.
But I think we do have this responsibility of doing that in a way that isn't subvertive, that doesn't try and use like tricks to get players to play, but just trying to do it from what we feel is just a fun experience. Obviously, we don't want players to be like addicted to our game to the point where like it destroys their life or has a negative impact on them at all. And I think we can just, as developers, we can be a voice to help curb that. But I don't think there's anything we can do aside from just being responsible with how we develop the game. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I don't know if that answers your question. That is a great question, and it's
Yeah,
probably a
that's
long
right,
blog
that's right.
post about that I could write.
Thank you for answering that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, everyone.